Propaganda is defined as information, ideas, or rumors that are deliberately spread widely to help or harm an individual, a movement, an institution, or a nation. It's served to start and end wars, to galvanize some and alienate others. It's a powerful tool capable of winning over and steering the direction of hearts and minds. 1 year ago, a filmmaker named Slavko Martinov put out a film titled just that, Propaganda. Described as the world's first propumentary, the film is an attack against the hyper-capitalist structure, political manipulation, and consumerism that characterizes the Western world. Check it out.
In this film, we will reveal the methods used by the propagandists to control populations on behalf of their owners. Although these rich and powerful owners only make up 1% of the world's population, they have mastered the use of propaganda over 99% of the world's population, turning them into consumer slaves who work harder and harder to buy things they don't need.
What makes this film different, though, is that it's shot through a North Korean perspective of the West, giving the viewer a truly unique vantage point over the information being presented. So joining me now to discuss his film further and the role of propaganda in society today, I'm joined by the filmmaker himself, Slavko Martinov. Thank you so much for coming on.
Such a pleasure.
So, why did you choose to make this film as a New Zealander? What were you critiquing?
Well, I think it's the same for people anywhere, and I'm sure most of your viewers would understand. It was in 2003, and I just started found myself being more and more critical of everything I was seeing and reading and hearing, and I wanted to get to the bottom of the sort of uniting recipe behind all the lies. And so I started researching propaganda, and I thought I have to make a film that deconstructs propaganda. You know, if everyone could find out what we knew, you know, then you could start creating a sort of antidote to all the lies, you know.
And the film was released as if it were a product of the North Korean government. Why did you choose to present it in that way?
Well, the first thing you have to do in making a film is think, how will I find an audience? And if I just did a straightforward, dry film about propaganda, I'm not sure anyone would watch. So I thought, I'll have to do something to really get people's attention. So I thought, how about an intercepted propaganda film? And North Korea was the obvious choice.
And I love the film so much because it speaks at such obvious truths, but you put it in such a way that's just so interestingly presented. One of them is the cult of celebrity. I mean, you show people who are hysterical receiving and being awarded consumer items. I wanted to play that really quickly for our audience.
Sure.
Thanks to Western propaganda, half the world still believes their invasion of Korea in 1950 was needed to fight communism. They have no idea that our eternal leader was trying to unify Korea after their leaders tore us apart for war profiteering. They remain ignorant of why we feel harm towards this grave injustice. And what was the result of this manufactured war? A bombing campaign that destroyed 75% of our country and killed 4 million of our citizens. The American bandits also tested biological weapons by dropping infected insects and other agents on us and our Chinese brothers and sisters.
I mean, really disturbing footage there, and of course we'll get to the cult of celebrity later. That was a clip actually showing just the havoc that was wreaked on Korea and the entire peninsula during the war. I think it's one of the most misunderstood wars, really, from the American perspective. Yeah. What do you think are some other big misconceptions about Korea from the West?
Well, about North Korea, I think, stem from the complete lack of information, and a lot of that has to do with North Korea itself. I mean, it's just a closed book. No one really knows what goes on inside the North Korean leadership, and of course that creates the perfect environment for really one-sided propaganda. So all we get is just Western propaganda, and our leaders telling us that you know, they're a threat to world peace. You know, the same old line that's trotted out for everyone, and without, you know, the balance of North Korea saying, here's where we stand, here's our history, here's what we're about. You know, what are we left with? But you know, to think that the leadership's mad. I'm not saying that's not entirely true to some degree, but you know, North Koreans are human beings as well, and you know, Korea sees itself as one Korea, and it's only a recent split, you know. So, yeah, I think that, you know, again, they call the Korean War the forgotten war. There's just this complete vacuum of information about North Korea, other than, you know, just the tired old, you know, one-sided thing that's trotted out over and over again.
And of course,
that they're part of the axis of evil.
Right, and of course the provocations with these military exercises that we're seeing over and over again. I mean, really hyped up, who's provoking whom kind of thing. Have you talked to any Koreans since making this film in North Korea?
No, not in North Korea, but the actor who played the professor in the film is South Korean, and his mother's North Korean. And, you know, the reaction from the South Korean government was, well, they accused me of being a North Korean agent for making the film, and he's been accused of being a North Korean spy, which is about the worst thing for a South Korean, because his reputation's in tatters. But of course, the thing about talking to North Koreans, you're really not allowed to, you know. If you go on tours, they're very closely supervised. You speak to who you're allowed to speak to, and of course, if you talk to North Korean defectors, how can you be sure, you know, exactly what's being said? There's just this complete lack of information about North Korea and North Korean people and what they really, really think.
And talk about the threats that you've received, because you just mentioned that, you know, this guy was accused of being a spy, but you've actually gone through a pretty hellish couple of years since making this in terms of being threatened.
It's been really, really strange. I mean, I had really careful talks with everyone involved on the film. Well, there were only 8 of us, but, you know, think really carefully about, you know, the risks. It seemed kind of grandiose and paranoid to think about, you know, what could happen from making this film if there would be an international incident. And we spoke about these things really clearly, but the first thing that happened was I was brought in for questioning by the counter-terrorism unit. And that was before the film ever came out, because I brought in films from Kuala Lumpur, from a Muslim enclave I got that were quite hardcore. I was starting to collect footage, and they stopped me at customs for a long time, and I think I went into the system then and they were watching. And so I was questioned by them, and then of course the South Korean government started investigating us, and the Korean Society in New Zealand accused us of being communist sympathisers and North Korean agents. And I've tried going, well, I have gone to the media, our current affairs programs in New Zealand, and to counter it by telling the truth. But of course, it's almost like the boy who cried wolf. You know, each time I say something now, people are like, yeah,
who are you really?
Yeah, given the film you made, I'm not really sure about anything you say is the truth.
So is that why you decided to come out? Because I know that originally when this was released, you did have this kind of statement with it saying that this was released by the government and you were anonymous.
Yeah, we were, the whole idea was to, in order to make a point about propaganda, make a propaganda film wrapped up in a propaganda campaign, if you like, propaganda squared, if you will. And, you know, at some point I knew I'd have to come out and say, okay, we made this. But I didn't expect it to happen the way it did, and it...
You said even the Catholic Church.
Oh, the Catholic Church banned Eugene Chang from communion, and his entire community, people who'd been his friends, and he was held in very high regard in the Korean community in our city, they just don't talk to him, and he's had to remove himself from, you know, all the boards he was sitting on, and people refused to send their children to the school where his wife taught because, you know,
that's amazing.
They're not Korean spies. It's breathtaking, really. And
it really is.
And we had a meeting with the Korean Society because I tried to clear it up. As filmmaker, you know, I'm responsible for what happens, and if you don't like what's said, you know, take issue with me. And we had a meeting with all the members of the Korean Society, and it was like a McCarthy-era communist witch hunt, and they literally were accusing us outright of being agents and spies, and it was it would have been absurd if it wasn't for the real repercussions, you know.
I think it really shows you that the witch hunt hasn't really ended. It's kind of morphed into something else.
Not
we
at
still
all.
are trying to knock down the last remaining communist states in the world.
Yeah, and in trying to, you know, combat it and tell the truth, you just kind of make it worse. People, you know, tend to get very comfortable with their beliefs, and it's very hard to counter them, and it's just so ironic that, you know, there's a real-life propaganda campaign going on against us.
Yeah.
Eugene, and the counter-propaganda campaign from me, which is sort of ongoing.
And we don't have time to play that cult of celebrity clip, but it really, it just shows people just hysterical receiving consumer items in Oprah, and you're saying, you know, did this man receive an award? Did he win something? He's getting hailed by news agencies, and it's really just that he bought the first iPhone on the market. Sure. Why do you think the cult of celebrity is such a crux of the moral deterioration of Western society?
Well, I mean, it's because it represents what everyone started to aspire to. You know, people aspire to, you know, in this age of, you know, capitalism and consumerism, having more and more and more, and with that comes the representation of what's the height of this. Well, celebrity, it's what people want. The fame, the money, that illusion of what's great. And now it's afforded to people for the smallest of things, and social media now, I think, you know, for all its benefits, is kind of dangerous too. I think now we see the democratization of propaganda. Everyone's playing a part in it, you know.
And I think it's been proven that the more you have, the less really happy you are. Slavko Martinov, we're out of time. Thank you so much. It's an honor to have you on Filmmaker Propaganda. Everyone check it out. Amazing film. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.